All right. Good evening, everybody. Good evening. Yes, Pankaj, they do. Good evening. Uh, Gaurav, just wait for your time. I will be covering anti-defection law in a fair amount of detail today. Okay? All right. Okay. So we had done broadly a comparative review of the houses and presiding officers as far as it was relevant as far as the pre was concerned. Now we will get into the disqualifications and all of those portions. So, of course, we understand that there is an age qualification. You've got to be a citizen and residency and all of that. And there are, of course, certain provisions that have to be understood in the context now. So, we are going to now be looking at removal of MPs and MLAs, and of course MLCs. And to understand the removal of MPs, MLAs / MLCs, we will be looking at it from two perspectives. First is a permanent removal, which means a removal from that specific house. And the second is a temporary removal, that you've just been sent away for some time. So this is like a temporary removal. Now, for example, a permanent removal is a lot like rustication from a school or a college, and a temporary removal is like a suspension, where you have been asked to stay at home for 7 days, 10 days, 15 days, and so on and so forth. This has absolutely no civil or criminal implication per se, and this is something that you have to understand. When we look at a permanent removal, when we are disqualifying people, this is also called disqualifications. Disqualifications do not have any civil or any criminal sort of repercussions on the MP, MLA or the MLC, but temporarily, when we look at it from a suspension point of view, I'll make you understand what this is. This does definitely have a civil and a criminal implication on a case-by-case basis, right? So we're going to come to that in just a bit. So you've got disqualified MPs and you've got suspended MPs, and whatever is true for MPs is also true for MLAs. There is no special criteria or there's no additional benefit of any kind. So when we say that an MP has been disqualified, it basically means that the MP has been asked to vacate the house. The MP has been asked to not be an MP anymore in that specific house, in that specific term, in that specific tenure, and they can come back again by fighting an election again. Re-election is completely possible. So when we say it's permanent, it is permanent to that specific house for that moment, but re-elections are perfectly possible. You can re-elect yourself and come back in any way possible. But as far as suspensions are concerned, there is no need for a re-election, because you've just been temporarily disallowed to attend the proceedings of the house. So you've been suspended basically from attending a specific number of proceedings of a house, and that's fundamentally the difference. Now, when we look at permanent disqualifications or when we look at disqualifications per se, there are basically three forms which have been given, and we'll go through each of these forms, and of course we'll do a separate one in a further amount of detail. But to understand this carefully enough, there is one which is in the core text of the Constitution, There's something which is in the core text of the Constitution. And then, of course, you have the 10th schedule of the Constitution, which is substantive. And you also have the Representation of People's Act. Now, in all of these three cases, you can disqualify an MP or an MLA, no matter who you are, elected, nominated, whatever the case might be, from the House. As far as suspensions are concerned, suspensions are directly related to privileges. Okay, they're related to privileges. And of course, a breach of those privileges or a violation of the immunities that have been given to you. These are some things that we must understand in a certain context. Right. Now, the first very basic is, well, this is again in part 5 and part 6 of the Constitution. For your MPs, this is Articles 101, 102. For your MLAs, part 6, this is 190, 191. 10th schedule is also popularly called the Anti-Defection Law. We are going to spend a lot of time analyzing Anti-Defection Law in a substantive amount of detail immediately after we are done with this particular slide, if you'd like to call it that. And then, of course, you've got the Representation of People's Act, which have certain electoral offenses per se that have been defined. And as far as privileges are concerned, they are for your MPs and MLAs separately defined. I think it's 105 for MPs and 194 something for MLAs. I'll just cross-check the article numbers when we come to the main slides in just a bit. Okay, now, broadly, when we look at some basic criteria, we understand that your core text refers to if you are no longer a citizen, or for example, you are somebody who is financially insolvent. You are financially insolvent. Or let us say a person is not of an unsound, is not of a sound mind, diminished mental capacity, so to speak, right? And of course, it deals with office of profit if you're holding an office of profit. Now, I understand office of profit is something which is quite confusing for a lot of people. I will take this up separately, but all you need to know is the terms office of profit are not clearly, explicitly defined anywhere in the Constitution. Two, it is that office of profit basically has a negative connotation to it, but that's not the case. Any office in the world, public or private, is an office of profit. Don't look at profit from a very capitalist point of view. Profit is you are offering some services in return for which you are getting some compensation. That's okay. Everybody has an office of profit. You will have an office of profit. I'll have an office of profit. But that does not mean that every office of profit is bad. The problem is if you have two competing offices and they have not been exempted, then it's a bad thing. Like, for example, you will be the collector of a district in some time. Now, as the collector, you will also often be the returning officer during an election. You're doing two things, right? Not office of profit. You will also be the chairperson of the district disaster management committee. You'll also be the chairperson of, let us say, a nodal officer for MG Narega. You may be a nodal officer for a very, very large scheme. You may also be the nodal officer for health, for that matter. Now you have multiple roles. These roles are not considered a problem of office of profit. They are exempted under office of profit. But the term office of profit is largely used in the context of the elected executive, right? So or the elected representatives of the country. Like, for example, The vice president is also the chairperson of the Rajya Sabha. There are two different offices, but both of them is by the same person. That's not an office of profit. It's you're exempted from being, charged with office of profit. So that's something that you must understand. That's the basics of it. We'll of course get into the details. I'll give you Jaya Bachchan's example. I'll give you Sachin Tendulkar's example. There are several such examples. We'll get to them in our subsequent lectures on electoral reforms, but this is more than enough as far as the basics are concerned. Right now, anti-defection law applies to all MPs and all MLAs. It applies to all members of houses, all members of all houses. And we know that there is only one person. In fact, there are two. There are two people who are a part of it all, but not members of it. So the president, of course, and the vice president, who is also the chairperson of the Rajya Sabha, is the presiding officer of the Rajya Sabha, but is still not a member of the Rajya Sabha. So the vice president is not subject to anti-defection law. Okay, everybody apart from this person at the house level is subject to anti-defection law. If you think about it, anti-defection law basically means four things. It is that if you are an elected MP and you are an elected party MP, remember we studied the word party MP. So you're an elected party MP and you have decided to change your party as soon as you won the election with the backing of that party. So a change of party of an elected party MP, right? Changing a party. If an independent MP joins any political party, that is also not allowed. I'll get into the details of it, don't worry. If an elected MP or an MLA or an MLC and who's independent, right? Who's been independently elected, then in that case you can't join any political party. If you disobey or you work against the interests of the party, if you disobey the political party, right? For example, the whip has been issued and you're supposed to vote a certain way, but you did not, or you have been speaking publicly against the same party that you belong to. So a lot of these cases, will always be, will always be considered under anti-defection law. And at the same time, if a nominated MP or an MLA, right, which is now mostly for the second houses, if they join any party after 6 months, within 6 months you can join any party. So if any of these four basic things happen, when an elected party MP changes their political party, when an independent MP joins any political party, when any MP disobeys a whip, which means any party MP disobeys a whip or disobeys the direction of the party, and if a nominated MP or an MLA joins any other party after 6 months, you're basically violating what is called anti-defection law. Then you also have electoral offenses. Now, under electoral offenses, what you have here is something fairly simple. It is there are certain criminal offenses. If you've been, and there has been a lot of Supreme Court intervention here. So there have been cases. We'll do this in a lot of detail later. But for example, there's a case called the Lily Thomas case, which says that if you have been convicted for an offense wherein you have more than 2 years of rigorous imprisonment, then you will be banned from contesting elections for 6 years and you will be disqualified from the current post that you have. Similarly, corruption or conflict of interest, all of those things, if a relative of yours has a stake in the tender and you are the one responsible for allocation of that tender. So a lot of these things basically happen, and this is what is called your Representation of People's Act. In election offenses, we will cover this in detail. And I've also been informed that these have partially been covered for you in your governance classes as well. So I'll make sure that you're not overburdened with the same information from two different sources. Now comes the interesting part, the analysis part, the logic part, the derivation part. See, the derivation part is fairly simple. The derivation part is that if you compare the three disqualifications under the core text or anti-defection law or electoral offenses, you will notice there is a pattern. The pattern is that in the case of electoral offenses and the core text of the constitution, the grounds that we have given, right? Criminal offenses, corruption, you've become financially insolvent, which means that you're unable to discharge your debt, or somebody has become of an unsound mind or an unsound mental capacity. In both of these cases, if you notice that both of these things are actually happening outside the house. They are happening in a capacity that goes beyond the house. But if you very carefully see the provisions of anti-defection law, you will notice that whenever there are these party changes or whenever people are disobeying the directions of the party, it is basically affecting rule number 1, which is the democratic mandate, which is the majority of the house. So you could say that anti-defection law affects the majority and the political balance inside a house, whereas the other two affect the larger scheme that goes beyond the house. Now remember what I said. I said the provisions of anti-defection law, as we would know them to be, the provisions of anti-defection law as we would know them to be are something that affect the internalities, the majority of the house, whereas the provisions under the core text and the Representation of People's Act affect the conduct of an MP or an MLA beyond the house. So if anti-defection law is affecting the conduct inside the house, this basically means that you are affecting the political stability of the house. And because this is happening inside the house, you apply rule number 3, which is separation of powers, and you understand that inside the house, it is the presiding officer who gets to decide on questions of anti-defection law. It's the presiding officer, the speaker or the chairperson of the Rajya Sabha or whatever, gets to decide the questions of anti-defection law. But when we look at the provisions of core text and we apply rule number 4, checks and balances, we know that we can't ask the legislature to disqualify one of their own. The executive is a subset of the legislature and it's a parliamentary democracy, so we can't ask them. Now, this is still happening within the legislative branch. So we can't ask the judiciary because of rule number 3. And the only person who connects all the three by law is supposed to be apolitical is the president. So on matters of the core text and the Representation of People's Act, it is the president who decides. And because the elected executive can't be involved, and the permanent executive is also supposed to be apolitical, and a heightened version of independent permanent executive, autonomous permanent executive, called the Election Commission of India, will then advise to the president on the removal of both of these, because the Election Commission is your election regulator in the country. So the whole point of giving you an explanation here is to basically tell you, that in matters of the core text and electoral offenses, Representation of People's Act, the president on advice of the Election Commission decides because of rule number 4. But in terms of anti-defection law, the presiding officer decides because of rule number 3, as it's affecting the internalities of the house. Once you understand this logic, it is extremely easy for you to know, and you will never forget it, and you will never have to memorize it. Of course, we'll get into a lot of detail in anti-defection law, because there are several questions that often come from anti-defection law. And as far as privileges are concerned, so the first thing you must understand is that there is absolutely no law or the breach of privileges. Privileges is a lot like contempt, how you have contempt of court, which is the court and the judge. You also have contempt of the parliament and of a specific MP. That in the context of the parliament is called a privilege. Now, you don't have a law on it, which is why we still follow a lot of British conventions in this regard. And here, the House can decide, the House on the recommendation of the Parliamentary Committee on Privileges. We'll get into a lot of discussions here, but here you can decide to either impose a fine or even send an MP or an MLA to jail, right? So this is how it is. This is how it's usually done. Now here, when we say the House decides, it's also usually the presiding officer who decides. We're going to come to that in just a bit. It's the presiding officer who gets to decide these things, and of course takes the help of the parliamentary committees on privileges, who also, by the way, often help the presiding officers for investigation into matters of anti-defection law. So in reality, this is how it works. The Parliamentary Committee on Privileges have two sort of functions, right? So very clear on this. The President, on the advice of the Election Commission, gets to decide on matters of core text and electoral offenses. The anti-defection law is decided by the Speaker on the advice of the presiding officer. We do not have a dedicated law on privileges, so we still follow a lot of British conventions. And of course, this presiding officer here decides often on the advice of the parliamentary committees. Okay, right? Now, we will of course get into the technicalities of these. I'm going to spend a considerable amount of time on anti-defection law because this is very, very popular and is often asked in the exam. Okay, so let's start and let's get this part right. I'll give you about a minute or two to make a diagram here. I'll give you a minute and then we'll continue. But the whole point of a diagram like this is that now you can visualize and you can compare, both of these things. What is the difference, how it is largely done, and it is exactly the same for MPs, MLAs, and MLCs. No, president has no discretionary power at all. Yes, Mehul, absolutely there is no need to memorize. Speaker on the advice of the presiding officer. Speaker is the presiding officer. All right, 30 more seconds. Please wait, I will get into all of this in detail. Saurabh, writing the same thing in capital letters will not make me answer it. So just wait. Okay. You will see main syllabus point 5 in your notes, and it'll be very easy for you to do it accordingly. Right? We're now getting into anti-defection law. Right? Now, syllabus number 5 of your mains exam says Parliament and state legislatures, specifically structure, functioning, conduct of business, powers and privileges, and issues arising out of these. Okay. Now, if you see the kind of questions that have been asked, there have been several questions where anti-defection law has been involved. In the year 2013, there was a question for 10 marks carrying 200 words. The question was the role of individual MPs, which means private MPs, has diminished over the years, and as a result, healthy constructive debates are not usually witnessed. How far can this be attributed to anti-defection law, which was legislated but with a different intention, right? So the question is, has anti-defection law, by the fact that you have to vote a certain way, you have to speak a certain way, has that really taken away the individuality of our MPs? And that's a very important discussion to have, because today the Parliament, especially the Lok Sabha, is a formal exercise, right? There is absolutely no bill which can ever not pass in the Lok Sabha as long as the BJP have a majority. This is also true for Congress in the 60s also. So that's the first question that has been asked. The second question was in 2019, where there was a question which said the individual parliamentarian's role as the national lawmaker has been on a decline, which in turn has adversely affected the quality of debates and their outcomes. Please discuss. So this will also have anti-defection law as one of the reasons why this has happened over a period of time, right? So we're going to see that there are, of course, questions very repeatedly asked from this, and you can expect a question from here. Now, there are, of course, a lot of times, a lot of things keep happening, but the law on anti-defection has largely not changed. So one of our focal areas when you study a topic like this is anti-defection law. So let's start. And we're going to spend some time on anti-defection law. See, the word defection as we would know it, and this is where things get very interesting. Defection is basically the change of loyalty. Any change of loyalty in any manner is actually called defection, right? It's basically called defection. Now, this can happen in the context of, this can happen in the context of possibly everything that you see around. इसका एक simple मतलब होता है धोखा, right? So there are several forms of defection. Like for example, a lot of you who have engineering as an optional, right, would have taken sociology or political science or anthropology. You've all committed what is called optional defection, right? People who change their religion, of course, have committed religious defection. You see this in sports all the time, whether it's the cricketing leagues in India or football leagues internationally. Players keep moving from club 1 to club 2, from league 1 to league 2, right? All of that happens. That's basically what is called sports defection. Political defection is what we are referring to when you're changing your political loyalty, when you're changing your political association, a right that you have fundamentally under Article 19, which gives you the freedom of association. Now, when we talk about the anti-defection law, this is primarily a law which did not exist in the original text of the Constitution. Because a lot of our Constitution has been inspired from the Government of India Act 1935, by therefore implying that a lot of the British parliamentary practices have also been made a part of the Indian parliamentary practices, and the British parliamentary practices till date don't have anti-defection laws. but we do. So something would have happened that has compelled us to make a specific law where we are stopping these changes of political loyalty. Now, this is because in India, the whole concept of anti-defection law was needed because people were able to, under the garb of freedom of association, were using this as political opportunism. It's a very simple concept that if there is a party which has 200 seats, there is a party 2 which has 100 seats, and let us say you require 210 seats, for example, to form government, hypothetically. Now, you will require 10 more MLAs or MPs. Now, these 10 MPs or MLAs will be given some money, they will be given some benefits, and they'll be said, why don't you come to us? We are anyways having the powers to form government, and why don't you move from the opposition to the government, and we'll make some of you ministers as well, right? So this is basically the idea behind it, and the primary reason to actually come up with anti-defection law was to curb the menace of what is called political opportunism. Is to curb the menace called political opportunism. This did not exist in India at the time. This law did not exist, and it is only through the 52nd Constitutional Amendment of 1985. It's only through the 52nd Constitutional Amendment of 1985, which is at least about 35 years since the formation of the Constitution and the implementation of it, that you really got into making a law very specifically, very specifically, penalizing or prohibiting anti-defection law. And one of the primary reasons behind this is that we have really dug our own grave on this. India did not originally have it. It originally did not have it, but we ended up, making it for us. Now, has this quashed the individuality of our MPs or MLAs? Yes. Now comes the most important question from a conceptual point of view. The 52nd Constitutional Amendment is a constitutional amendment under Article 368, but without state ratification, because the powers to conduct parliamentary and state elections are vested with the center through the Election Commission of India. So this does not require state ratification because it is not taking the powers away from the states. The center always had the powers to do this. The center always had the powers to do this. They're just adding more powers to the powers that they had. The states had zero powers to decide what are the grounds for disqualification. It is the center who used to anyways decide. The power always lay with the center. This is not affecting center-state relations in any manner, right? It is not making the center any more powerful than the states. Still, respective presiding officers are deciding their own thing, but the center and the state relations are nowhere getting affected, which is why you do not require state ratification. So it was a constitutional amendment in 1985, which was under 368, but without state ratification. Now, so as I was telling you, that this is something which was added as the 10th schedule, and of course corresponding articles were 101, 102, 190 and 191 of the Constitution. 101, 102 have larger MP disqualifications. We studied them. So you had to just add one more line that said, refer to the 10th schedule for further details. Now, as I said, this was primarily with the intent to curb political defections. Now, we've discussed the broad grounds. I'm going to come to the grounds in just a bit in a lot more detail, but this is the basic idea. Now, let's understand why are we talking about it? What has really happened in the recent past, which has really put this up in our faces? Then, of course, I'll get into the meanings of it, the dimensions of it, so that once you understand what's happening, you can therefore relate it to the problems at all. And in your exams, you can quote a couple of instances in your introduction itself as events which have instigated the question to be asked in the mains exam. So now let's look at this in a fair amount of detail. So for example, One of the things actually happened in Gujarat, where there was this person called Jignesh Mewani. Now, this Jignesh Mewani person was an independent MLA who had fought the elections in Gujarat and had won on the premise, had campaigned in his constituency by saying that I am somebody whose political ideology is that I don't have a political ideology. And because I don't have a political ideology, I am able to do this rather excellently, rather sufficiently, without any discourse problems as such. And I don't want to associate with another political party because I want to work for the people. I have no grand aspirations of becoming a minister, and I want to be grassroots, and therefore I'm fighting my elections independently, which sounded like a fairly good deal. Now, the problem was that he recently made a media statement and he said he has joined the Congress in spirit. Now, you see, when an independent MP or an MLA gets chosen from the constituency, it is because he or she or they have told the constituency that they have no political ideology or a political party that they want to align with. They want to provide the people a slightly less political alternative front, right? Now, when you go and join the Congress, who is a political party sufficiently with a number of seats in Gujarat, you are betraying the trust of the very constituency who voted you to power and said that this is what I'm going to do. Like, I'll give you a very simple example. Like, for example, let me give you a simple example. Like, for those of you who would have seen my 2022 YouTube plan, or who followed me on my Telegram channel and who see a lot of work that I do on my website, right? 90% of everything that I do is entirely free of cost. The only two things that I take a little bit of money from the students from is polity, and now would probably be the optional by the mid of this year. But the point here is not that. The point here is that I ask you to join my Telegram channel. I ask you to be a part of YouTube, be a member of the website. All of this is entirely free because I said that I am over and above institutions. I don't want to say that because A institution is better and B institution is not good. It is my responsibility I'm like an independent, MLA, but not because I'm still with an institution. Next, but I'd like to function as somebody who tells the students that, boss, if A institute's work is not good, even if it is our institute, I'll tell you it's not a good. Don't read it, it's not worth it. And you know me, I'm very blunt about these things, right? If X teacher is good, X teacher is good. If Y teacher is not good, Y teacher is not good. If X material is good, X material is good. Y material is not good, Y material is not good. Period. End of story. Because it is my best interest. But tomorrow, if I start saying, no, this is the best, and this is the only thing that should be done, and I am also associating with that institution, then you will have to question my integrity. Then I have betrayed my students, and whatever I am is because of the students. Whatever little I am, and I still think I have a very long way to go. Whatever little I am is because I've always worked in the best interest of the students, because I have been one in the earlier days. So I understand the plight that you go through, and it is therefore my moral responsibility to essentially balance sustainability and the moral ethos of education. Right? Now, the second I break that, I break the trust that you and I have. Right? When I tell you that this does not have to be read, it is something that I tell after a lot of research. Because I know the value that my word would have. A lot of students will not do something if I tell them not to, or if I tell them to do, which is why there's a lot of responsibility for me in a very limited public domain. That's exactly what the case was here. You have betrayed your constituency, who has chosen you, who wants to sort of follow you, and all of those things. But that's not something that should be betrayed. And that's exactly how independent MPs or independent MLAs are not allowed to join any political party, right? Now, Bengal last year has been fantastically in the news for multiple reasons, actually. So one was, of course, a disqualification petition was against Mukul Roy. Mukul Roy, who originally was a BJP MLA, then joined Trinamool Congress, came back to the Trinamool Congress, and this disqualification petition has been pending with the Assembly Speaker for more than 8 months now, right? And he basically had contested and won the 2021 Assembly elections on a BJP ticket, and then he had won the Trinamool Congress. Then he joined the Trinamool Congress, who essentially is in power. This is a classic case of political opportunism, where you left the Trinamool Congress, joined the BJP. BJP does not get majority, you're back to the Trinamool Congress, right? And of course, then the Calcutta High Court had to intervene and had to refer to a Supreme Court order which says that it's been more than 8 months. You have to decide within 3 months. I'm going to come to the role of the judiciary also in just a bit. But the point is a very simple one. The point here is that this is a classic case of political opportunism, a classic case of how there is no time limit to things, and how the entire institution of democracy becomes a matter of mockery, So that's that. In Jharkhand, former CM Bahulal Marandi, very popular name in Indian politics, also faces similar proceedings after he had merged his entire party, the Jharkhand Vikas Morcha Prajatantrik, with the BJP. Now, there are of course certain built-in provisions which I will discuss about in terms of party mergers and party splits, that it was not just one MP but a collective of MLAs or a collective of MPs who've joined an entire political party altogether. Now in Rajasthan, 6 Bahujan Samaj Party MLAs have merged their legislature party with the ruling Congress, a move which is challenged by the BSP and the Supreme Court, who recently gave 6 MLAs a final opportunity to explain the merger. A similar issue that happened with Jharkhand also happened in Rajasthan, where Bahujan Samaj Party, Mayawati's party, there were 6 MLAs from her party who all of them. Now, these are all elected people. If you're not elected, you're not a part of the house, none of this matters to you, right? So you were elected, you won a couple of seats in Rajasthan. Now you are basically the Bahujan Samaj Party elected in the Rajasthan Assembly, and you went and joined the Congress, right? So this of course was challenged by the BSP, said why the hell are you joining the BSP? Why the hell are you joining the Congress? You're not allowed to. Now the Supreme Court of course gave the 6 MLAs a final opportunity to explain why they did what they did. The matter is still not been decided yet. Now, an extension of what happened in Bengal again happened at the Lok Sabha level, where there were 2 Trinamool Congress MPs and 1 YSR Congress Party MP. YSR is a South Indian party who also face similar proceedings. Now, Trinamool Congress basically wants to disqualify 2 of its MPs. One of them is Sisir Adhikari, who is the father of Suvendu Adhikari, who is a very, very well-known face in Bengal politics, for joining the BJP as the son like the son, like the father like the son. And the YSR also wants to disqualify its MPs for certain statements that their MPs had made against the party. Now, if you go a little back, if you go to 2019, in Goa, 10 out of the 15 Congress MLAs actually merged their entire party with the BJP. And in 2019 itself, as I was telling you, the Rajasthan MLA issue had happened. Now, both of these cases were merged to the Supreme Court. And in Sikkim, again, 10 out of the 15 MLAs of the Sikkim Democratic Front had also joined the BJP. So basically, this wholesale transfer of elected MLAs to the ruling party is a very common feature in India, which of course undermines the very ethos of what is called parliamentary democracy. Now, the most recent judgment on anti-defection law is the Keshav Meghachandra Singh versus Manipur Assembly, where the Supreme Court basically dismissed a minister when the speaker had not decided on this anti-defection case for about 3 years. The court said that ideally the speaker should not take more than 3 months. Now, in line of this judgment, in the December 2021 winter session, KTS Tulsi, very, very well-known lawyer, had the pleasure of interacting with him at some point of time, also moved a constitutional amendment bill in the Rajya Sabha, where he said that we should amend the anti-defection law and put a 3-month deadline on deciding on anti-defection law cases once the complaint has reached the speaker. Now, this is of course why all of this is in the news, why, and every year you will have enough of these instances. So when you're writing the mains exam, you can choose 1 or 2 of these and nicely put them up. You can name the people and the parties as it is, because what you're doing is you're stating the facts. There is nothing political about it. There is nothing derogatory about it. What you are basically saying and stating are undisputed facts. Okay, so this is how it is. Now, you can take a minute and, in case you want to add something, just give me a minute. I'll just freshen up and come. All right. Now, I must also, before I get into the Indian context, I must also tell you, this you may not find a lot of reference for the exam, but the whole concept of political opportunism, right? The whole concept of political opportunism is not just an Indian concept. It is a concept which is very globally known, right? Globally known, right? So let's understand how this works and what is the basic explanation around it. The basic explanation around it is, if you look at almost all of the democracies of the world, UK, US, Australia, Canada, all of them have seen umpteen cases of defection. Right? For example, all of you would have heard of a politician called Winston Churchill, who's also served as the British Prime Minister for quite some time, and is one of the most well-known politicians across the tunnels of time. It is said that Winston Churchill had also committed defection during his days. So defection is something which is extremely global, but there are only a very few countries who have penalized defection. And most of these countries who have penalized defection are ex-colonies. You'll find them mostly in the Asian and the African region. And when you look at the degree of penalizing, what most countries have done is they have penalized their MPs who are joining another party, because that's just dhoka. But if you are voting against the direction of your party, if you're voting by applying your own mind and wisdom, in that scenario, there are very few countries in the world, including India, who've penalized it. And India is not in very good company. I mean, if you look at it, probably I think Zimbabwe, Bangladesh, Pakistan, that's the company that we keep when it comes to the evolution of the law. Okay. Now, let's understand how all of this works. Why does this happen? See, a fundamental question is, if, for example, you've let's say the 17th Lok Sabha, you were a Congress party MP, you won the election, you realize that, boss, in the Lok Sabha you really have no standing, because the government is of the BJP, the laws are being made by them. You really are just playing the role of a why is this wrong, why is that wrong kind of a person. And worst case scenario, if you are an independent MP, right? Now, if you are an independent MP in that scenario, you are literally a nobody on the floor of the house. So that is why people often get a little surcharged and they want to do this. Now, as I was telling you right at the very beginning, I was explaining to you how something would have happened in the country which would have led to, us wanting to make the law. it is usually around this time where there is the 67 to 1972 period. This is also where a lot of regional parties started emerging. And this is considered to be one of the most turbulent periods of Indian electoral history, where approximately across 4,000 MPs and MLAs, and we've done these numbers in the presidential elections also, around 2,000 had committed defection at least once. Things had become so difficult that in 1967, out of the 210 defected legislatures, 116 had actually become ministers. And by 72, about 50% of all our MPs and MLAs had defected at least once. I'm sure you would remember of this, or you would have heard of this legend Haryana MLA called Gayalal, who basically changed 3 parties in one day and 15 in 5 days. And that's why you often hear of a term called Ayaram Gayaram, because you never knew what party he was a part of. And of course, this was affecting governments and political parties all through, which is why several attempts were being made from 1973 onwards, but they failed, the bills lapsed. Finally, the 52nd Amendment in 1985 becomes the start of what is called Anti-Defection Law. So, there are primarily 2 major changes legislatively and 2 major changes judicially, from the judiciary side, interpretations, because of rule number 4. So you basically added the law, you added the 10 schedule through the 52nd Amendment of 1985. This is how the 10 schedule and all of that were added. Then you made certain changes to the law through the 91st Amendment of 2003. You would also remember this as the law which, as the amendment which regulates the number of ministers, and you would understand how both of these are actually correlated. And the Supreme Court in 93 and 94 in the Quixote Zulahan and the Ravi Nayak case basically gave interpretations. For example, what is the meaning of disobeying a party? What is the meaning of voting against a party? What is meant by resigning? When can the judiciary intervene? So after the presiding officer has made a decision, then it can go to the judiciary. The judiciary can question the outcome but can't question the process. We'll come to that in just a bit, right? Okay. Now, so this is largely how it has evolved. Some interpretations have come in terms of judicial review and the meaning of certain disqualifications, and the 91st Amendment has added certain changes to the law, right? So basically the whole party split thing that we were talking about, that has been done here, and I'll get you the technical details as well. Okay, now, so this is something I wanted to give you, is because this is also your standard format for any question on any law which is penalizing in nature. So all you've got to do is, your first heading should be grounds, your second heading should be authority, your third heading should be exceptions. In this case, the fourth heading does not apply, and your fourth heading can be punishments. And if you notice, the standard arguments are always the same. Whether it is Indian Penal Code or Anti-Defection Law or juvenile justice, they're almost the same. Are the grounds vague, or are the grounds comprehensive? Is the authority competent? Is the authority partial, impartial? Are the exceptions justified? Is it really defeating the purpose of penalizing something? And are the punishments effective, right? In this case, our punishments are not really that effective, because you can come back by winning another by-election to the same house in the same manner. So you can use this structure for almost every other question which can be asked in any other penalizing law format. Okay, now I'm not going to give you a break immediately. We'll finish this and I'll give you a 10-minute break, so don't worry about it. So let's just focus on this. So you've basically got 4 grounds. voluntarily giving up membership, disobeying party directives, independent MP or an MLA joining a party, and a nominated MP or an MLA joining a party after 6 months. Now, the Supreme Court in the Quixote case and of course in the Ravi Nayak case have given certain interpretations to all of these. So when we say voluntary giving up membership, see, a formal resignation is not necessary. Sometimes the act speaks for itself. That, for example, why are you seen near another party's headquarters? Why are you meeting with the leaders of another party without informing, your own party? It's like me saying, I'll go to say Vision and say hi, and if I don't tell the next IS guys. Like, for example, some of us teachers as Vajiram teachers have basically committed coaching defection, right? We've left Vajiram and we came to next IS. That's basically coaching defection, right? So basically giving up. So I'm duly guilty of anti-defection law, right? Anyways, so it does not have to be a formal resignation. You don't have to write an email to the party leadership saying, "Dear Adhyaksh ji, this is to regrettably inform you that I don't feel happy in your party. So bye-bye, take care," and all of that. You don't have to do all of that. I mean, your actions are speak louder than words, right? So that's of course the case. Second is disobeying party directives. Now this is very interesting. As I told you, we have certain groups and group leaders. These are called whips, right? Now, if these are called whips, so we must understand what this is, right? Okay, so let us say whips are basically, so the government, so if it's the Lok Sabha will have majority party 1, and then you may have some parties, supporting parties, like the whole alliance thing. And then, of course, you will have your opposition parties. So opposition party 1, opposition party 2, party 3, so on and so forth. So if it is an alliance, let's say 2 political parties are together in an alliance, say UPA, so they can have one wing, they can have one whip. Similarly, BJP and let's say another party is in alliance, so they can have one government whip because you are all in alliance. Sometimes you are not with an alliance and you still have a few members, right? Do I feel guilty for leaving Vajiram? No, I don't, and that's absolutely not. I couldn't be happier. Honestly, I couldn't be happier. Not because of anything else, because the control over the subject that I get here, that's for me, all that matters is I get to teach the way I want to, which I think is in the best interest of the students, and it makes a lot of difference. So that is why, right? No, I don't. Anyways, so whips are of course like this, and sometimes you will have a single loner party. होता था classroom में कि you had the cool gang, and then you had the challenger to the cool gang, and then you had a third gang who did their own thing, didn't care about the either two gangs, right? So everybody had a group leader and some assistant group leaders. The assistant group leaders are whips, right? So a whip can be issued for everything, but a whip does not have to be issued for everything. The person is also called the whip, and the action is also called the whip. So the government whip of the BJP issued a whip to the BJP MPs in the Lok Sabha is a perfectly valid statement, right? Now, a whip is basically a written document. You send it to the MP. Ki boss, morning 8 o'clock, show up, wear orange color uniform and vote yes on the farm law. Now in December, vote no on the farm law. Okay, so that is basically what is called a whip, right? That's basically what is called a whip. Now, very interestingly, very interestingly, for example, the Aam Aadmi Party. The Aam Aadmi Party has one MP in the Lok Sabha. The person is called Bhagwat Mann, who's now the chief ministerial candidate for Aam Aadmi Party in Punjab, right? Now, Bhagwat Mann is the only person in his group he's like how I was in school. I had a group of my own, but I was the only one in that group. So I used to tell myself what to do, and I had imaginary friends, right? So so that's exactly what is called, a single party whip. So what Bhagwat Maan used to do was, he used to issue himself a whip कि आज मैं ये करेगा, और मैं अपने आप को कहूँगा कि डियर भगवत मान, वोट नो ऑन फार्म लॉ फ्रॉम भगवत मान whip. Okay, so that is how it works, right? So if you vote against a certain whip, a direction, or you're giving certain interviews or anything, all of those things of course are counted, right? Now very interestingly, very interestingly, a whip, I've said this before, can be issued for everything, does not necessarily mean it has to be issued for everything. That's not the case, really. Apart from this, if an independent MP or an MLA is joining a political party, you must understand why this is the case. Why is this not allowed? This is not allowed, as I said before, because the independent MP or the MLA has already exercised their rights of political association by not having an association, right? If you have the freedom of speech, you have the freedom of silence. If you have the right to life, you may also have the right to death. So if you have the right to a political association, you also have the right to not have a political association. So independent MPs or MLAs have chosen to not have an association, not to be a part of a political party, which is just an association. And that is what your marketing technique is to your constituency. That is what your USP to the constituency is. That's what you're trying to convince the members of your constituency for. So therefore, it is perfectly okay, it is perfectly fine for you to not get into the technicalities. It's okay for you to not join any other political party, because you've promised your constituency that you are not going to join any other political party. But that's not the case with nominated MPs or MLAs, because they've been nominated for their expertise, right? उनका भी दिल है, उनका भी मन करता होगा. So they should also be given an opportunity to join a political party, because they also have a fundamental right to political association. But that fundamental right can be reasonably restricted. Otherwise, they can keep jumping from one party to the other wherever they feel the tide and the wave is flowing in whatever direction. So you get about 6 months and you can decide, like, how you're in a prom, to decide, right? Yes. So you can then decide and then join a political party if you want to within 6 months. If you don't want to join, you don't join. But if you have to join, you join within 6 months. After 6 months, you can't join. If you join, then a complaint can be made against you. The speaker can disqualify you. The whip is appointed from within the members of that specific party in the house. That's it. Okay. I'll show you who the whips are. Don't worry. If you want to know who the whips are, I'll just show you. Just give me a second. See, you have a chief, don't worry about chief whips and deputy, because you've got 300 MPs, so you will require multiple people in a hierarchy. So Shiv Pratap Shukla and Rakesh Singh have been appointed as parties chief whips in the Rajya Sabha and the Lok Sabha respectively. So इनका ये काम होता है. ठीक है. Anyways, right. Now, who gets to decide? The presiding authority gets to decide. The leader of so who gets to issue a whip? So as I told you, there is a group leader, leader of government, leader of opposition. Each party has its own. They ask the whips to issue certain directions. And who gets to decide on matters of anti-defection law? I told you the presiding officer does. In most cases, it's the speaker or the chairperson of either of the houses. But there are absolutely no suo motu powers. Otherwise, the Lok Sabha speaker will remove everybody else and only the party remaining in the Lok Sabha will be the BJP. And because at the end of the day, you are removing somebody from office, it is a quasi-judicial process. That therefore, because of principles of natural justice, the Constitution did not provide for any time limit, which is why cases go on for years and years and years and no action is taken, right? Now, exceptions is something you must understand. This is as per the 91st Constitutional Amendment 2003. What happened before it is not relevant. So it's very simple. If there is political party A and then there is political party B, and both of them are in the house, both of them are elected members of political party A, elected members of political party B. Now, let us say 2/3 of the elected members of political party A want to join political party B. Completely fine. That's okay. They will join and they can become one political party or they can retain their names. They can become an alliance. That's absolutely no problem at all. You can continue being you. But the remainder 1/3 who were left, who did not agree, who don't want to join, they can continue as it is. They can't join any other party and they can't form a new party as well. They have to continue as it is. ठीक है? So this is what your exception is. इसके अलावा सब कुछ एंटी डिफेक्शन है. इसके अलावा सब कुछ एंटी डिफेक्शन है. So basically 2/3 of a party, of the elected members of a party can join another party. The remainder 1/3 can continue as it is separately as a group. They can't join any other party and they can't make a new party of their own. बस इतना ही है, इसमें कोई कॉम्प्लेक्स है ही नहीं कुछ. Now, just to give you a technical detail here, so the anti-defection law basically deals with situation where of members of political party, independent members, nominated members. The only person who's not under anti-defection law is the chairperson of the Rajya Sabha, because you are the vice president of India, and I've already told you how you would be how would you be impeached. Now, in limited circumstances, the law allows legislators to change their party, which is the exception that I have given you. Now, let's quickly run through what our basic expectations have been. How can you be disqualified? If a member of a house belonging to a political party, which means we're referring to a party MP, if a party MP voluntarily gives up membership of the house, votes contrary to the decision issued by the party, or does not vote, or when such a direction is issued. Now you must understand this. अगर विप ने बोला है, पार्टी का ऑर्डर है, yes तो yes, no to no, abstain to abstain. You can't say that you told me to vote yes, but see I didn't vote yes, but I didn't vote no also, see I abstained. It is wrong. Whip has to be followed to the T. अच्छा लगे बुरा लगे, it has to be followed to the T. आप 15 दिन पहले अगर आपने पहले से परमिशन लिया तो कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं है, और कांड होने के 15 दिन तक आपको पार्टी ने बोला चलो कोई बात नहीं, नो डोंट डू इट नेक्स्ट टाइम, दैट्स ओके. If an independent candidate, right, independent MP or an MLA joins any party after the election, and if a nominated MP or an MLA joins after 6 months, are there any exceptions? There are basically one exception. You will not be disqualified if, I said, your original political party merges with another only if 2/3 have agreed, and therefore you and your old party can become a member of the new party, and the others who do not accept, they function as a separate group. They can't make a new party, they cannot join any other party, right? Okay, yeah. All right, then who has the power to disqualify? I said the chairperson is the power, or the presiding officer has the power. And if it is the chairperson, मतलब if it is the presiding speaker ही कर रहा है धोखा, then you will elect somebody else who will decide this. The deputy speaker will not decide. The house will elect somebody else to preside over the anti-defection law proceedings against the presiding officer, if the presiding officer is charged with anti-defection. ठीक है, अब एनालिसिस पे चलते हैं. ये हुआ क्यों था? This was primarily done for two reasons. One, you wanted to combat political defections, and two, you wanted to understand how this process makes a mockery of our voting system. I've given you the historical context already, which is why Minister in 1969, IIPA Chaban, had recommended that we should not only, they should be disqualified, they should be barred from holding any public office, which of course was also implemented in the 91st Amendment, right? And the second argument is actually the most interesting one, which is that this argument is based on that political parties are democratic units. And if most people are being chosen, see 90% of our MPs or MLAs are actually party MPs. So today our parliamentary system is also a party parliamentary system, right? So if it's a party parliamentary system, then in such a scenario, you cannot under all circumstances, break that the trust that the party should have with the constituency. Think about it. कि तुमको खाना खिलाया, तुमको नहलाया धुलाया, तुमको अच्छे से रखा, और तुम कह रहे हो कि मैं जा रहा हूँ. ठीक है. While I can understand there can be reasons why you would want to do this, but if there are reasons, there will always be repercussions. ठीक है. All right. Now, अगर एंटी डिफेक्शन लॉ में मेंस में क्वेश्चन आता है तो यही 4 सवाल आते हैं, आप चेक कर सकते हो. समझ में आता है दैट द लॉ व्हाइल इट डिटर्स डिफेक्शंस, डज इट रिस्ट्रिक्ट द इंडिपेंडेंस ऑफ द वोटर, ऑफ द लेजिस्लेटर, बिकॉज यू आर बाउंड बाय द whip. Second, does it lead to a suppression of inter and intra-party debate and dissent? Third, does it restrict people from saying something which is against their official party position? And fourth, the person who's deciding, the speaker in most cases, usually comes from the same political party who's in majority. So is there some kind of neutrality involved? And any question would essentially come from these 4 questions only, right? तो बस हम इन 4 सवालों का जवाब बनाएंगे और आगे बढ़ते रहेंगे. So, what is the impact of it on the legislature? Simple. You will be disqualified if you vote against the party whip, and therefore you have to vote as per the party whip, and if you don't, then you will lose your seat. So therefore it restrains your individuality and why you have been chosen. अब वो बीजेपी एमपी पंजाब से, उसको अच्छा लगे बुरा लगे, उसको फार्म लॉ पे वैसे ही वोट करना पड़ेगा जैसा बीजेपी के विप ने लोकसभा में बोला था. And therefore this breaks the link of accountability between the voter and the elected representative. उसकी वजह से your rule number 4, where the parliament is supposed to keep a check on the executive through the right questions, through voting in a certain way, वो सब बर्बाद हो जाता है. Absolutely. Now let me give you an idealistic situation. The Prime Minister of UK before Boris Johnson, I think, yes, was Theresa May, right? Theresa May. Now, Theresa May was the Prime Minister of UK around the same time where UK was, sort of negotiating Brexit. So Theresa May, being the Prime Minister, proposed a plan on the floor of UK's Lok Sabha, which is called the House of Commons. And what happened was very interesting. MPs of the same political party as that of Theresa May voted against the proposal of Theresa May with respect to Brexit. Okay, voted against Theresa May on the issue of Brexit, right? Now, while this is okay, this is fine, this makes absolute sense to a certain degree. Now, when something like this happens, right, the opposition can quickly jump to no confidence and say, अरे देखो, PM का ही proposal, PM की ही party के लोगों ने reject कर दिया. So the opposition party in the Lok Sabha did exactly this, and therefore in the Lok Sabha of the UK did exactly this. They raised a motion of no confidence, and that motion, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, failed. Because the MPs of the PM's majority party in UK disagreed with the PM's Brexit idea, but had complete faith in her PM as her leader. And that's what is important. And when that doesn't happen, that accountability link gets broken. And therefore, the party leaders who then give directions to the whip or the whips themselves are the ones who decide voting and behavior कि अच्छा walkout करना है, अब नहीं करना है, इस पे object करना है, नहीं करना है. So it's all very orchestrated. It's all very it's very rehearsed. Okay, which is why it becomes such a problem to deal with in the first place, right? Now, how has it compromised the role of a legislator? See, in a parliamentary system, the legislators are expected to exercise their independent position. ये होता है. And what is your opinion as an MP and an MLA will be a combination of three things. One, what is in the interest of the public. Two, what is in the interest of the constituency. And three, the party affiliations that you and I can be a part of. Now, the fundamental freedom of choice would be undermined if the member is mandated to vote along the party line on every bill or motion. अगर तुमको बोला ही है कि ऐसे का ऐसे ही वोट करना है तो क्या ही फायदा हुआ. And even if the member has an opinion which is different from the leadership, you will not have the freedom to vote as per the leadership choices, right? Like for example, if there's an issue of water sharing between the states, MPs representing constituencies in different states will have to vote in a unanimous manner because you're a part of the same. Suppose BJP के 2 states में water sharing का dispute है, तुम दोनों भी तो वहीं से MP बन के आए हो लोकसभा में, लेकिन तुम दोनों को yes वोट करना पड़ेगा if there is a law that is being made around it, right? So that is why this is where there is always an issue, right? Now, has it impacted or affected a legislator's ability to hold the government accountable? Absolutely yes. See, you must understand all of this starts and begins with parliamentary democracy, okay? And how does it originate with parliamentary democracy is because we are operating under a system of checks and balances. And if you're operating under a system of checks and balances, this accountability can only be tested, if and only if the parliament is where the minister starts sweating. Doesn't matter who they are, what they are. आज तक कभी देखा है किसी बीजेपी एमपी या कांग्रेस एमपी को मनमोहन सिंह से सवाल पूछते हुए जब मनमोहन सिंह पीएम थे और अब मोदी जी पीएम है? हिम्मत ही नहीं है किसी की. And that is why your parliament, which is supposed to be where you could have the best possible discussions on policies, on debates, on issues, that never happens. And because of anti-defection law, you are reducing a legislator from making the government accountable. And if they try to vote and debate and discuss, then they would be kicked out. Which is why all BJP MPs have the same opinion on farm law, have the same opinion on CA. ऐसे कैसे हो सकता है? How all Congress MPs are against farm laws? कोई तो होंगे जो support कर रहे होंगे. अपनी भी तो अक्ल लगाओ. right? Like for example, in 2012, I'm giving you a non-controversial example, where there was a vote in the Lok Sabha on 50% FDI should be open in multi-brand retail. In that, all members of the Congress party, because they were in power in 2012, voted for it, and all members of the BJP voted against it. ऐसे कैसे? सबका एक ही व्यू कैसे हो सकता है? ठीक है? Now, I understand that the party or the coalition in power will have the majority. तो तुमको कोई निकाल थोड़ी ना रहा है, तुमको कोई तुम फेल थोड़ी ना, तुम सरकार थोड़ी ना गिर रही है. If your MPs don't think you should have FDI or multi-brand retail, and that is why it undermines the entire process of accountability. Then becomes the last question. The last question is very simply, has it affected a citizen's ability to hold his elective representative accountable? Well, that is absolutely true, because the anti-defection law breaks the chain. अब मैंने इतनी मेहनत करी और मैंने अपने MP और MLA को चुना और मैंने कहा कि भाई ये मेरा व्यू है, तेरे को मेरा व्यू जाके पार्लियामेंट में देना है. आपने तो नहीं दिया ना व्यू. See, the MP or the MLA either represents the view of the constituency, or the MP or the MLA represents the view of himself or herself. But तुम पार्टी के चक्कर में क्यों तुम सब बर्बाद कर रहे हो? Like for example, let us say land acquisition has to happen, and the government has a very rigorous land acquisition law. उसने जाके लेजिस्लेटर को बोला कि देख यार, इसके ना मैं MLA के पास गया और I told the MLA that boss, don't vote for this, okay? The MLA has to then justify कि boss, no, I think this is the right thing to do, and therefore you have the way to question and understand what is in the national interest and what is not. बट वो जाके चुपचाप वोट करके आ जाएगा और बोलेगा कि नहीं नहीं ऐसे नहीं, मैं तो मेरी नौकरी का सवाल था, मेरे एक ना करने से क्या ही हो जाएगा. द होल करप्शन आर्ग्यूमेंट कि इफ आई एम नॉट करप्ट एंड अदर पीपल आर गोइंग टू बी करप्ट. अरे बट यू डोंट बी करप्ट ना बाबा. So that is the basic discussion. And if you have a problem with the overall policy of the party, then you can please express your displeasure and you can carry on and you can move on, right? That's extremely important. Now, under anti-defection law, this entire mechanism breaks down. वो बोलेगा मैं क्या कर सकता हूँ, मेरे को तो पार्टी विप से ऊपर से ऑर्डर था, अब मैं कुछ नहीं कर सकता. And I given you an example also. Like for example, if there is a bill in the parliament to regulate fish trawling. Fish trawling is fish economic activity. और उसका ना environment में बहुत impact पड़ता है. There's a lot of erosion of diversity and flora and fauna. As an MP, if you're representing a coastal constituency जहाँ पे लोगों का घर ही चलता है इससे, and you're supposed to vote compulsorily on a bill for fish trawling, regulating it, तुमको पता है इससे लोगों की नौकरियां जाएंगी, खाने को नहीं होगा, and a whip has been issued, the MP will say मेरे पास कोई ऑप्शन ही नहीं था, मेरे को anti-defection law का प्रॉब्लम था, which is why this has been actually put in the way it has been put. That is the reason. This is why it has, reduced the country's democracy to a mere joke. ठीक है? And therefore, the overall decision making of the House becomes a problem, where it is done unilaterally by a bunch of people who are the party leaders, and that is how you're able to decide कि भाई क्या करने की जरूरत है. तुमको कुछ नहीं करना है, तुमको पार्टी लीडर्स को पकड़ना है, विप्स को पकड़ना है और तुरंत विप इशू कर देना है, बात खत्म हो गई. So the decisions that are being taken are actually not taken collectively as the parliament or collectively as a party also. बीजेपी में कौन सी बड़ी डेमोक्रेसी है, कांग्रेस में कौन सी बड़ी डेमोक्रेसी है? इफ द लीडर्स आर डिसाइडिंग व्हाट नीड्स टू बी डन, व्हाट डजंट नीड टू बी डन, एंड दैट इज हाउ यू मस्ट अंडरस्टैंड द वर्ल्ड इज अ वेरी डिफरेंट वन. दिस इज व्हाट आई वाज टेलिंग यू इन द बिगिनिंग, दैट दिस इज नॉट यूनिक. देयर आर सेवरल अदर्स. देयर आर 40 countries in the world which have penalized anti-defection, which have penalized defection. They have anti-defection laws. बट मोस्ट ऑफ देम क्या करते हैं कि भाई अगर तुमने दूसरी पार्टी ज्वाइन कर ली तो हम तुम पे डिसिप्लिनरी एक्शन लेंगे या तुमको डिस्क्वालीफाई करेंगे. देयर आर ओनली 6 countries in the world, just 6 countries in the world who say कि भाई तुमने हमारे खिलाफ भी वोट करा ना तो तुमको हम निकाल देंगे, right? And these 6 countries are India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Guyana, Sierra Leone and Zimbabwe, as I was telling you. ये कंपनी ना अच्छी कंपनी नहीं है बॉस. Which is why we have to start looking at changing its identity. और ऐसा भी नहीं है कि विप डिफाई नहीं होता है, बहुत बार होता है. एंटी डिफेक्शन में नो कॉन्फिडेंस में तो डिफाई ही होता है. फॉर एग्जाम्पल इन 2008 जब वो न्यूक्लियर डील का इशू हुआ था, कम्युनिस्ट पार्टी हैड विड्रॉन एंड देयर वाज अ नो कॉन्फिडेंस मोशन. इन दैट केस कांग्रेस ने बोला था भाई नो कॉन्फिडेंस में व्हिप इशू करा था, प्लीज वोट अगेंस्ट नो कॉन्फिडेंस. 21 MPs of the Congress had voted for the no confidence motion. Cash for votes भी उसी टाइम पे हुआ था. In 2016 in Uttarakhand, some ruling MLAs sided with the opposition कि हमारा काउंट करो दोबारा बजट का वोट. वो अगर फेल हो जाता तो सरकार गिर जाती, right? And in 2015 again in no confidence motion Arunachal Pradesh, MLAs defected, joined the Congress MLAs defected, joined the ruling party in Arunachal Pradesh और उनके साथ मिलके नो कॉन्फिडेंस इशू कर दिया. नो कॉन्फिडेंस सक्सीड हो गया, सरकार गिर गई. अब फिर सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने कहा अरे भाई ये तो एंटी डिफेक्शन था, आपका तो ट्रांसफर ही नहीं हो सकता था, आपने कर कैसे दिया ये. So of course, you know, there have been a lot of these issues, and that is why ऐसा भी नहीं है कि स्पीकर, जो तुमको मैं बता रहा था कि स्पीकर वगैरह ने ढंग से डिसीजन लिए, ऐसा बिल्कुल भी नहीं है. कोई टाइम फ्रेम नहीं है, कोई डेडिकेटेड प्रोसीजर नहीं है, जो स्पीकर को मन करे वो करते हैं. इन आंध्र प्रदेश 23 YSR parties had defected to Telugu Desam party around the same time where the Telangana issue was happening. कुछ नहीं हुआ. 4 of these MLAs were made up ministers. Telangana में 12 were made ministers. So ऐसा नहीं है. It is all left to the discretion, which is why the ex राज्यसभा चेयरपर्सन, ये करंट वाले नहीं, इससे पहले वाले, उन्होंने हमीद अंसारी साहब ने बोला था बहुत पुराने में कि 3 महीना होना चाहिए. लॉ कमीशन ने भी बोला है कि बॉस यार स्पीकर इज एन इलेक्टेड पर्सन, उसको तुम नहीं कर सकते. इलेक्शन कमीशन ने 10 बार बोला है, हम कर रहे हैं ना प्रेसिडेंट को एडवाइस बाकी चीज़ों में, इसमें भी कर ही देते हैं. स्पीकर तो वैसे भी कॉम्प्रोमाइज्ड है. एंड दैट इज देयर आर सम रिकमेंडेशंस दैट हैव बीन गिवन कि पहला तो, एंड ऑल ऑफ दीज आर फ्रॉम द लॉ कमीशन, NCR, लॉ कमीशन 2015, दिनेश गोस्वामी, हलीम कमेटी, लॉट ऑफ दीज, राइट. तो क्या क्या उन्होंने बोला है? उन्होंने बोला है कि भाई ऐसा है, सबसे पहले ओनली इशू व्हिप व्हेन देयर इज अ नो कॉन्फिडेंस डेंजर. दूसरा, डिस्क्वालिफिकेशन शुड बी ओनली व्हेन देयर इज अ मेंबरशिप इशू और व्हेन दे आर नॉट वोटिंग. ये बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है और कुछ नहीं. और ये जो तुमने मर्जर अलाउ करके रखा है, सारा खेल इसी में, इसको हटाओ. ये वॉलंटरीली गिविंग अ मेंबरशिप को बहुत क्लियरली लिखा होना चाहिए. तुम कांग्रेस के साथ चाय पीने चले गए, तुमको अगले दिन निकाल दिया, ऐसे थोड़ी ना होता है. I also meet friends of mine from Bajiram before class and after class when I come to next. आराम से हम चाय पीते हैं बीच वाली गली में जाके. तो क्या मैंने डिफेक्शन कर दिया? क्या उन्होंने डिफेक्शन कर दिया? अब दोस्ती तो दोस्ती है ना, इधर पढ़ाए या उधर पढ़ाए, क्या फर्क पड़ता है. ठीक है. एंड देन ऑफ कोर्स द डिसीजन मेकिंग शुड बी लेफ्ट to the election commission and the president in an advisory capacity. स्पीकर को जितना जल्दी अगर कर ही रहे हो तो जितना जल्दी वो डिसाइड करके खत्म करो. सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने 3 महीने बोला है, लॉ कमीशन ने 6 महीने बोला है, कुछ तो करो. एंड एज फार एज योर अदर इम्प्लीकेशंस आर कंसर्न, सच एज अगर तुम कोई MP थे and you were a part of a parliamentary committee, so if you've been disqualified as an MP then you should also be disqualified from parliamentary committee. तुमको किसी PSU में एक इंडिपेंडेंट डायरेक्टर बना के रखा था, या तुम किसी को कंसल्टेंट बना के रखा था किसी वर्किंग ग्रुप में मिनिस्ट्री में, ये सब नहीं चलेगा, ये सब नहीं अलाउ करेंगे. ठीक है. देयरफॉर डिफेक्टर शुड बी बार्ड फ्रॉम होल्डिंग पब्लिक ऑफिस और एनी रेम्यूनरेटिव पोस्ट ड्यूरिंग द रिमेनिंग टर्म. इसका मतलब ये नहीं है, सपोज आई हैव बीन डिस्क्वालिफाइड फ्रॉम द लोकसभा ऑन एंटी डिफेक्शन, मेरे लोकसभा सीट पे बाई इलेक्शन होगा और मैं दोबारा उसी सीट पे इलेक्शन करके उसी पार्टी से भी जीत के वापस आ सकता हूं, कोई नहीं रुक सकता. नाउ यू मस्ट अंडरस्टैंड, सपोज बीजेपी ने मुझे निकाल दिया, लेकिन मैं हाउस में तो अभी भी हूं. टिल द टाइम आई एम अ बीजेपी पार्टी टिकट MP इन द लोकसभा, इवन इफ द बीजेपी हैज थ्रोन मी आउट फ्रॉम देयर पार्टी, I will still have to follow BJP guidelines because I'm in the Lok Sabha because of the BJP. That makes me an unattached MP, right? तो ये सारी चीजें हैं, इसके ऊपर आपको कुछ और करने की जरूरत नहीं है. समझ में आया? Understood this? पक्का? तो ये आपका डिस्क्वालिफिकेशन है. अब पूरा प्री जोड़ लो, पूरा मीन्स जोड़ लो, एंटी डिफेक्शन में आएगा तो इतने सही आएगा, इसके ऊपर कुछ नहीं आएगा. इसी को 5 बार पढ़ना है 1 साल के अंदर और क्वेश्चन निकालना है, इसके बाहर कुछ नहीं आएगा. समझ में आया? Now, do you understand how comprehensively notes are done? Do you understand how discussions are made? Do you understand how it is all put together in one place? Yes. ठीक है? Clear? All right. You can take a 5-minute break now. Actually, you can take a 10 minutes break. तभी तो हमने कहा मिडिल पाथ कि बेहतर करो, मेक द लॉ बेटर. All right. Yeah, that could be done. You can go through the essential reading list. Chalo. We are done with the anti-defection law part of it. We'll now spend some time on privileges. Okay, so let's start. Okay. Chandra. Yes, Chandra, I will. I am speaking to the manager immediately. कि F batch का geography class from 8 to 11, from 9 to 13th. ऐसे कैसे चलेगा यार, बच्चों की जान लेंगे क्या ये लोग? ठीक है, मैं देखता हूँ. Now we'll move to privileges. चलो. Okay. Disqualification is like rustication from school. Privilege is like suspension from school. मतलब आपने प्रिंसिपल का ऑफिस में सुतली बम फोड़ा और प्रिंसिपल का बाल जल गया, रस्टिकेशन. आपने बॉयज टॉयलेट में बम फोड़ा और वो टॉयलेट फट गया, तो सस्पेंशन. दिस इज कॉल्ड पार्लियामेंट्री प्रिविलेजेस. Now let's understand what parliamentary privileges are. They're extremely easy to do and you will never go wrong with these parliamentary privileges. Okay? चलिए शुरू करते हैं. This is extremely easy and will be done under all circumstances. ठीक है? चलिए शुरू करते हैं. ओके. जे बैच में भी, डी बैच में भी मैं देखता हूं. ओके, चलो लेट्स स्टार्ट. ऑल राइट. तो पार्लियामेंट्री प्रिविलेज का मतलब क्या होता है? पार्लियामेंट्री प्रिविलेज refers to the rights and the immunities enjoyed by the parliament as an institution. तुमको बोला था that an MP and an MLA has an absolute right, मतलब वो कैसे भी वोट करे, जो भी स्पीच बोले उसके लिए कुछ नहीं हो सकता, राइट? We've discussed this as dimensions in Article 19 also. MPs and MLAs have the exact same amount of privilege when it comes to, or immunities, they have the exact same amount of immunities with respect to each other. They have absolute immunity from how they vote and how they speak on the floor of the House. And this is in fact a massive loophole. If you have absolute immunity for how you vote, then even if you take money for how you vote, there is nothing that can be done. So in Jharkhand, the relative of Shibu Soren had actually taken money to vote for a specific Rajya Sabha candidate from Jharkhand. The CBI conducted an inquiry and the relative went up to the Supreme Court and said, I may have taken money, but I have immunity for how I vote, so there is nothing you can do against me. So this is of course an issue. Now our beloved MP Mahua Moitra, right? If you see, all her speeches are always on the floor of the parliament and she leaves no stone unturned in questioning the integrity and the very soul of the government in power. Had she made those speeches outside the floor of the parliament, she would be in trouble. So first we have to understand what is parliamentary privilege. Parliamentary privilege is either the privilege of the MP or the MLA of the parliament or the legislative assembly, and if anybody from outside is also violating these privileges. ऐसे contempt of court होता है वैसे ही, ठीक है. Now parliamentary privileges, as I said, refers to the rights and immunities enjoyed by the parliament as an institution and MPs in their individual capacity, without which they cannot discharge their functions. So you must understand that there is a need for parliamentary privileges. If you don't give MPs or MLAs the immunity for how they vote and how they speak on the floor of the parliament, then you will not be able to have effective checks and balances, and as to how the executive will therefore not be accountable to the parliament. Now, if you think about it carefully, parliamentary privileges are the antithesis of anti-defection law. Because on one hand, you're saying that if you vote against the party, we will throw you out of the house. And on the other hand, they are saying, vote however you want to, and we will not and we will not touch you for how you vote and how you speak on the floor of the house. And that is fundamentally where the problem lies. That is fundamentally where the issue is, right? So they're actually antitheses of each other, and that is something that we must get right. Okay, now according to the constitution, the powers and the privileges of the MPs at parliament have to be defined by the very parliament itself. Okay, all right. Now no law, as I was telling you right at the very beginning, has been enacted in this respect, and in the absence of any such law, it continues to be governed by the British parliamentary conventions. And what is a breach of privilege? It's a violation of any of the privileges of MPs or the parliament, also for legislatures respectively. So casting reflections on MPs, parliament, बोल दे कि parliament डरपोक है, MP डरपोक है, speaker डरपोक है, ये सब ठीक है. Or you're writing something against the parliament in such a way which is, regressive, which is demeaning the integrity of the parliament. तो इन सब पे privilege लग सकता है. Right? This is basically a breach of privilege. Now, let's understand the law. How does this work? What are the privileges? See, very simple. They cannot be prosecuted for saying or doing anything in the house. Anti-defection है कि तुमको हाउस से निकाल दिया. प्रिविलेज है कि तुमको जेल नहीं भेज सकते, तुमको फाइन नहीं दे सकते तुमको. And not only this, you have the freedom of arrest 40 days prior and 40 days after the session, and anything that is said during the time of it. And apart from this, the legislature also has the powers to regulate its own internal affairs that covers the behavior including disruptions, vandalism and violence of the house. And therefore, the courts or the police cannot interfere. जब तक हाउस नहीं बोलेगा कि भाई इसने गलत काम किया है, तब तक कोई बाहर का आदमी नहीं आके कुछ कर सकता, ठीक है. एंड देयरफॉर द मेंबर्स ऑफ द हाउस कैन ओनली बी पनिश्ड बाय द हाउस, और इसमें तुम्हारा इम्प्रिजनमेंट, फाइन, सस्पेंशन सब कुछ चलता है, ठीक है. नाउ लेट्स सी सम एग्जांपल्स. व्हाट इज द कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनैलिटी फॉर इट? Articles 105 and 194, I was just telling you, explain to you that there are certain privileges and they can only be claimed till the time you're an MP or an MLA. Retire हो गए, ex MP MLA के लिए नहीं है. And you must understand that the argument is that this is necessary for keeping the parliament accountable, right? Now, you must understand the house can also ensure that the person who has violated it must be present, warning दे दी या फिर बोला कि explain करो या apology दो. For example, in 1967, 2 people were held to be in contempt of the Rajya Sabha because of visitor gallery से the leaflet फेंक रहे थे. अलग ही उनको भगत सिंह चढ़ा था. In 1983, one person was held for shouting slogans and throwing chappals from the visitors gallery. They were also sent to prison. In 2007, there was an ambassador of foreign services also called Ronan Sen. Right now, the committee the Lok Sabha Committee on Privileges has held. उसने basically एक editorial में या किसी interview में बोल दिया था कि लोक सभा is a headless chicken. Right? और तब the committee said, अरे उसने MP के खिलाफ थोड़ी ना बोला है, उसने तो generally बोला है, and therefore no action was taken. Similarly, in 2008, the editor of an Urdu weekly had referred to the deputy chairperson of the Rajya Sabha as a coward. एंड देयरफॉर कि भाई तुमसे ठीक से डिसीजन नहीं लिए जाते हैं, in that case the person was held guilty and a fine had to be paid. Okay, now if you think about it, why is this important? आप हाउस में दंगा करो, हाउस चलने नहीं दो, आप चेयर कुर्सी टेबल फेंको, तो यू आर ब्रीचिंग प्रिविलेज ओनली, राइट? द मॉनसून सेशन दैट हैपेंड लास्ट ईयर was in fact the third least productive session of all Lok Sabhas of the last 2 decades. That is why in the winter session several MPs were suspended कि अगले सेशन में दिखना मत, कट्टी, अगले सेशन के लिए छुट्टी, and that is why they were protesting outside, the parliament. The worst session generally for the houses was the 2010 winter session जब 2G scam हुआ था. उसके अलावा 2013 and 16 के winter sessions where तेलंगाना 2013 because 14 में division हुआ था and demonetization in 2016. So in March 2020, 7 Congress MPs, Gogoi, Pratham, Manikam, Gurjeet, Benny, Rajmohan and Kuriakos, all of them are suspended from the Lok Sabha from the rest of the budget session. इनको इस बार बैठने ही नहीं दिया गया, ठीक है, 2020 में, बिकॉज वो जाके स्पीकर के टेबल से जाके पेपर छीना है कि अरे आपको डेली राइट्स पे डिस्कस करना चाहिए था या क्यों नहीं किया. सो दीज आर सम ऑफ द इंस्टेंसेस दैट हैव हैपेंड, राइट? नाउ यू मस्ट अंडरस्टैंड दैट देयर इज अ सुप्रीम कोर्ट जजमेंट which does not deal with the parliament but directly refers to state legislatures. But since the immunities are the same, the judgment can be applied. सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने बोला कि बॉस वैंडलिज्म अलाउड नहीं है, तुमको जो करना है करो, तोड़ फोड़ नहीं कर सकते, चीजें डैमेज नहीं कर सकते, and therefore you are liable for your act. And that is the Supreme Court very clearly said, destruction of property cannot be equated to freedom of speech. And इसका मतलब ये नहीं कि क्रिमिनल लॉ से ही बच जाओ, ये आपको इसलिए दिया गया था so that you don't have to worry about any fear or favor and you can act in the best interest of the public. वो आपने करना छोड़ दिया, which is why it became a very interesting Supreme Court judgment and इससे बहुत कुछ बदल सकता है, right? Why only winter session? Because वो टारगेट नहीं किया था, अब वो दुनिया ऐसी चली थी तो अब क्या कर सकते हैं, ठीक है? Understood this. Now there are some solutions for this. The solutions for this are that the Parliament Disruption Index, which was basically thought of, the idea had emerged at the conference of presiding officers of legislative bodies, और उसमें ये basic ecosystem था कि जितने भी हमारे speakers थे across all the houses, सब लोग जाके देहरादून में मस्त ऐसा holiday करने के लिए गए और उन्होंने कहा कि भाई let's have a disruption index so that we'll rank our MPs and our MLAs and our houses, and जिसका सबसे ज़्यादा होगा we'll start taking action. And another recommendation is, अगर कोई दंगा करता है तो उसको पहले सस्पेंड कर दो, जैसे सिविल सर्विसेज में करते हैं, इंक्वायरी होते रहना, यहाँ पे इंक्वायरी पहले होती है फिर सस्पेंड बाद में किया जाता है. सो दीज आर योर बेसिक सोल्यूशंस, ठीक है? तो आपका पूरा डिस्क्वालिफिकेशन वगैरह सब खत्म हो गया.